Okay, I will get us started off. So firstly, thank you everyone for joining tonight. Welcome to the Professional Pilot Information Seminar, hosted by both Brampton Flight Centre and AeroCourse. Firstly, before we get any further into the presentation tonight, I want to let everyone know this video is being recorded and will be posted online. So just keep that in mind if you don't want your video on, proceeding with the rest of the seminar. Secondly, I want to make an announcement that Brampton Flight Centre is currently not accepting international students. The status of that has not changed. If you do want any updates for the status of that, you can always check our website, bramptonflightcentre.com. But unfortunately, we will not be accepting applications from international students for this IATPL or college intake. Next, I just want to say that the seminar tonight will be covering information about the IATPL program specifically. If it's the self-paced program you're interested in and have questions about, we have people at Brampton Flight Centre that would be more than happy to answer those questions. However, the focus of this presentation will be our professional programs. And finally, one note is that if you do have any questions you'd like answered, you're more than welcome to send any questions in the chat, as well as we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So with that being said, we will get into the presentation. So I'll cover just an outline of what we're going over in this presentation tonight. Firstly, we are going to discuss Brampton Flight Centre, and then we will get into the aviation industry, what you need to get started, as well as the commercial licensing requirements and potential career progression and opportunities. We will also go into, obviously, our professional programs, our IATPL in college. We'll talk about the kind of differences between those two programs, and what makes the IATPL program so unique, with the AeroCourse specific airline transport pilot license specific information. To introduce who will be presenting tonight, representing Brampton Flight Centre, we have our Chief Flight Instructor, Scott Chaco. We also have our Manager of Flight Training Administration, Kathy Stewart, and myself, the Campus Administrator. Representing AeroCourse this evening, we have the founder, Rick Stevens, and we also have an AeroCourse instructor, Francis Yanuzzi.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So most of you are pursuing pilot training as a career, and the good news is there is a shortage, and Transport Canada has shared with us some statistics. So you're looking at approximately 7,600 to 14,500 pilots will be required in the next 5 years. So if you're doing some research to see if there are jobs, the good news is there is. So some information about us. If you're new to the Brampton Flight Centre and you're not too sure about everything, we have been here since 1946. We have a fleet of 22 aircraft, comprising of the Cessna 172 as well as two Piper Seminoles. We have a full complement staff of flight instructors, which also includes flight test examiners, which is a huge help to us to help our students complete their flight training. And as well, we have two simulators on site here, a Redbird, and we just received an All-Sim last week, which is brand new. And the IATPL students have access to a full motion advanced simulator, which is used by our airline pilots. And in the past, we've always used CAE. So we own our own land here, and we also maintain it. We're also a not-for-profit. We have a maintenance team that takes care of our aircraft, and we're the only flight school in Canada that does engine overhauls. So we take care of our own aircraft right here on site. They don't have to leave the facilities or go elsewhere and be offline for long periods of time. As well, we are a Ministry of Training colleges and universities, and our graduates have the opportunity for direct entry with Jazz, Porter, and Sunwing. We will go into more detail in that a little later in the presentation. Thank you. Oh, I forgot one. So we do have a large community here, aviation community right on site. Air Cadets, we've got the Snowy Owls, First Base Solutions, they're a land surveying company, the Great War Flying Museum, as well as numerous private aircraft owners and our Recreational Aircraft Association.
Okay, over to myself. So like Sydney was saying earlier, my name is Scott. I'm the chief flight instructor here. And tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about the, I guess, aviation industry as a whole and aviation training. Now, both of those topics are incredibly complex, so I'm really just going to be scratching the surface, just kind of a quick introduction, just because we have so much more to talk about this evening. So if you're interested in becoming a pilot, and particularly for those of you that are interested in becoming professional pilots, the best way to begin, since a lot of you probably haven't been in a small aircraft before, is just to book an introductory flight. At Brampton, they're roughly 20 to 30 minutes. You can see the cost there is 160 plus HST. For the Brampton Flight Centre, you'll get to take control for the vast majority of the flight, pretty much everything minus the takeoff and the landing, just so you can get an idea of what it feels like and kind of the sensations you're going through in a smaller aircraft when compared to a larger one. Now, let's assume that you do the introductory flight and you had a fantastic time and you decide, yes, I do want to pursue this as a career. The next step that we always recommend is to get your aviation medical sorted as soon as possible. So, without going too much into the weeds of the details, effectively, to hold a pilot's license, you need to always have a valid aviation medical. If you're interested in becoming a professional pilot, you're going to need what is called a Category 1 medical, and that cannot be done at any doctor. It has to be done at a doctor that is a civil aviation medical examiner. It's a state physician that's been given extra qualifications by Transport Canada to assess pilots for flight readiness. It's not a particularly invasive examination, typical dyes, weight, color blindness. There is an ECG required for Cat 1, but there's no drawing blood or anything like that. At least from a CAMI perspective, later on in your career, who knows what operators will request in terms of medicals, but at least to begin with, not a particularly invasive procedure. Now, one of the frustrations that we run into is you cannot continue past a certain point of your training until this medical actually arrives in the mail. Now, we have no control over that at the Brampton Flight Centre. It's purely between you and your doctor. And we see tons and tons of delays and tons of frustrations in training just because we're waiting for this document to come in the mail. So if you get anything out of this seminar this evening, just make sure that if you're going for your Cat 1 medical at your aviation medical examiner, try to get it done as quickly as possible or as soon as possible for a couple of different reasons. One, it starts the whole process of actually getting that document in the mail. And I guess more importantly, if there is some sort of medical condition that would limit you from being a pilot, it's better to identify that early on before you invest lots of time and money as well. Okay, now this is a oversimplification, but if we're talking about a traditional route through aviation training, there are a couple different steps. The first thing that any, I'll say, career-oriented pilot would begin with is something called the private pilot's license. We won't go into all of the hours that are required and the training that is required today, but effectively, that is your first license that you can hold in Canada. After that, you would still hold that private pilot's license, but then you would start building time and doing extra training with an instructor to work towards your commercial pilot's license. So you can see there it's CPL. Now, the commercial pilot's license is the minimum license that you must hold to work professionally as a pilot. Okay, so that would be the first time where once you held that CPL, you would be able to start applying for positions. Wouldn't necessarily be at an airline, but we're going to be touching on that later on. Now, in aviation training, we have licenses, and then we can attach ratings onto those licenses. And those ratings give us extra privileges. So you can see here, there's a multi-engine rating and there's an instrument rating. We put them together. It's the multi-IFR, the MIFR, you can see there. So that is a rating that would allow you to fly an aircraft with more than one engine, which is the multi aspect to it. And then instrument rating is allowing you to fly in inclement weather. Okay, so both of those ratings would have to be attached onto your commercial pilot's license for you to get the vast majority of aviation jobs in Canada. And then, I guess in a traditional route, you would get a certain amount of experience, and then eventually you would be able to apply after a couple more written tests for an airline transport pilot's license, whether an ATPL. This is the top level of licensing for pilots in Canada. Now, let's assume that you held that CPL or maybe even an ATPL. What we're going to do here is we're going to talk just quickly about some pilot career opportunities. So, Sydney, I think you can just click through. We'll go to the next slide. The first one we just wanted to touch on is flight instructor. Flight instructor is what I do. It's what all of our staff does. It's for the most part an entry-level pilot position. It's a good way to get lots of pilot and command time, build your own schedule, get lots of experience training other pilots. One step up from that is something called air taxi operations, usually flying relatively small aircraft, often in Canada, serving more rural northern communities, things like, hunting lodges or fishing lodges or whatever it may be. It's pretty demanding work. There's lots of, calculations or, loading and unloading bags that have to be done by the pilot simply because there are no other people that are actually there to assist. One step up from that, we have commuter operations, just moving on to larger aircraft, flying more passengers. Again, usually feeding more rural communities and then bringing them to larger communities to maybe serve majors. Similar with the regional airlines, again, just moving up here in terms of size. You can see here we have Porter as an example, usually flying aircraft with anywhere from, you can see here, 20 to 70 seats. And very similar to the commuters, just serving smaller communities, bringing them to larger communities, so they can eventually move on to our last slide here. And that would be the major carriers that I'm sure everyone is already familiar with. Okay, so traditionally there was no, I'll say, fast track to a airline opportunity. However, the ATPL can assist with just fast tracking you to your end goal. And I believe now I'm passing it back to Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. So there are some different ways and different paths for students to obtain their training. So for the self-paced, it's exactly how that sounds. It's at your own pace. You may have to work, or maybe you're pursuing post-secondary education and you're trying to balance your flight training. That's always a great option for our students. And then we have two diploma programs, the IATPL, which we're delving into this evening, and then our college, which is a 14-month program. These are highly structured programs where we need a full-time commitment from the student. They're typically booked 6 days a week to fly, and ground school is 5 days. And just to share a little more about the self-pay, so you can obviously do your private pilot license, the commercial, and with a night rating in that self-paced, you're going to receive a certificate. The aviation medical, which Scott just shared with you, is the most important. However, you don't need to apply to this program as you would for the college or the IATPL. There's a lot of flexibility with our ground school for the self-paced. It's every month. We usually start close to the first day of the month. The students also have the option of pursuing their multi, and then obviously their multi-IFR, depending on what their career goals are. And it's very flexible. So again, it's if you're working or going to school and you need to conduct your training around that, it would be a perfect fit for yourself. Program length, we put varies because it really does. The average student probably can take up to 2 years depending on their outside commitments. However, if you're in a full-time program, you'll have that within the first 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, for covering the self-paced program. So I will take over now and discuss our professional diploma programs, our two full-time, heavily structured programs. So these are recognized as diploma programs from the Ontario Career Colleges Act, meaning that once you graduate and complete these programs, in addition to your flight training licenses, you will also have flight training diplomas. So that being said, those two programs are called the Integrated Airline Transport Pilot License Diploma Program, or the IATPL program. And we also offer a shorter program, the Professional Pilot Training Diploma Program, or the college program. So these programs run simultaneously. They follow the same admission and application process. They start the same time of year. So each year they will commence in July. The college program is 14 months, whereas the IATPL program is 20 months. So the IATPL is an additional 6 months of airline-specific training that prepares the IATPL graduates for a career in the airline specifically, whereas graduates of the college program would take maybe several different paths, like Scott mentioned, potentially as a flight instructor or as an air taxi operator, build up their hours before potentially getting to the airlines. Whereas in the IATPL program, through our airline partnerships, there is potential for direct entry to the airlines. In addition to this perk of potential for direct entry, the major selling points of the IATPL program would be the fact that you write your airline transport pilot license exams early at only 200 hours of flight experience versus the industry standard of 750 hours of experience. So we'll go into that a little bit more in depth in a little bit, but just briefly, Transport Canada, who is the governing body who oversees all of flight training in Canada, has certified the students in this program to be trained to such a high standard that they are competent to write these airline exams at only 200 hours of experience, when a pilot in the standard licensing route would need at least 750 hours of experience to be eligible to write these exams. So that just speaks to the level of standard of training that students are receiving through this IATPL program. Just further going into the differences between the college and IATPL program. Through both programs, you would start off with accomplishing your private pilot license. That would be accomplished within roughly the first 4 months of the college and IATPL program. You would then progress on to your night rating, eventually your multi-engine and instrument ratings, and eventually finish the program with your full commercial license and Group 1 instrument rating. So instruction through both programs includes approximately 200 hours of flight training experience. However, most students will build additional hours, whether it's through rentals or potentially repeated lessons. Most grads will have at least 200, if not more. In terms of ground school instruction, each program receives at least 500 hours of instruction over both the private, commercial, and instrument rating ground schools. However, the IATPL program specifically receives an additional 250 hours of ground school instruction, preparing students for a career in the airlines. So this 250 hours plus is airline-specific material. The first portion of that airline ground school is preparing students for those ATPL exams that I mentioned in the previous slide. The SAMRA and SARON exams, those are the exams that IATPL graduate students are able to write at only 200 hours of experience, whereas students out of any other flight training program, a non-integrated program, would need at least 750 hours to write these SAMRA and SARON exams. The second portion of this airline training is multi-crew coordination training with experience in the simulators that are actually used by the airlines. So for both of these programs, there is an application process. So we have begun accepting applications. January 2nd, the application window opened, and we will be accepting these until mid-March 2025, and that would be for July 2025 start date. So just again to highlight the differences between the IATPL and college program. So college graduates would be qualified to work for smaller or regional airlines or similar upon graduation, whereas graduates from the IATPL program are graduating with what's called a frozen ATPL, meaning that they are technically eligible to work at an airline upon graduation of the IATPL program. So just to, again, go over the components of the IATPL and college program, both programs include advanced things such as industry tours. For example, NAV Canada, we have a good relationship with Air Canada's dispatch team, so we often tour their dispatch center. Chartwright is a private aircraft ownership company that is a potential for career progression for graduates after the program. We also often do a tour at Porter's FBO as well. So lots of kind of opportunities to go behind the scenes through these programs. The Advanced Ground School also includes, obviously, our IFR, Instrument Flight Rules Ground School. So as Scott mentioned previously, the IFR rating means that pilots can fly in inclement weather. So even when there are no visual references, they can still rely on their flight instruments and fly safely. So this is a very intensive portion of the program that both the IATPL and college program students receive. Both programs also receive preparing for the industry classes, which include resume and mock interviews, as well as resume development labs. So we really try to help prepare our graduates for a career in the industry, and what it will be like on the other side of the flight school. Where the college program graduates in kind of the fall season, that's when the IATPL program gets into that in-depth airline ground school like we've been talking about. So that's the SAMRA and the SARON, those two major exam preparation. And then the final portion of the program is that multi-crew coordination training that Rick and Francis are going to be talking much more in depth about. So this is the real selling point, like I said, about the program. It's what really differentiates this program and sets it apart. And it's what makes our graduates so attractive to the airlines once they graduate from this program. So over both programs, you're starting flight training on day one of the program. Obviously weather dependent, but the emphasis is the fact that you are booked for flight training on day one of the program. So it's not that you need to pass a certain component before you start. Flights are scheduled 6 days a week, as Kathy mentioned, starting at day one of the program. So a typical day for a college or IATPL student would include a flight sometime in the morning, with ground school in the afternoon. Some days will look different. For example, when we're in the instrument flight rating ground school or airline ground school, you're not going to be completing flights before or after classes because you're going to have a 6 or 7 hour day of ground school, which could be very fatiguing. So you wouldn't want to be flying before or after those classes. So days can vary, but typically and definitely in the first portion of the program, you'd be flying sometime in the morning, followed by ground school in the evening. In addition to these flight and ground school commitments, students are also expected to do a certain number of required readings, as well as studying, preparing for quizzes that will be held in class. So there's a lot of time spent on the ground in addition to the flight training. So that's why, as Kathy mentioned, we need a full-time commitment for these programs in order for you to succeed. While we book flights 6 days a week, we also do encourage booking you a 7th day of the week. And this is just to account for weather, especially in these winter months. Almost every single day is canceled for weather, whether it's precipitation, winds, what have you. We get a lot of cancellations. So we recommend students in this program to have a booking every single day. So that way, when the weather does work out, you have access to an aircraft when you need it. So all bookings in this program are handled by myself. I make them at least a month in advance, if not further in advance. So I'll always book you with an instructor and an aircraft so that you have what you need, and we can always adjust bookings to become solo, potentially adjust your bookings to be longer for cross countries to build your hours, depending on what portion of the program you're in. But the point being is that you have support from administrative staff through this program in terms of all of your ground school and your flight training bookings. And as I mentioned before, part-time jobs would not be recommended for this program just because of the nature of the time commitment to this program. We also can't guarantee a set schedule, which is not often conducive to part-time jobs. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to the AeroCourse team now, who's going to talk more in depth about the airline transport pilot license specific training of the IATPL program. So Rick.
Here, Sydney, I'm just switching over. Hello, everyone. I know there's a lot of information that we're trying to pass down to you relatively quickly, and I encourage you to write your questions in the chat. And if we don't get to them right now, we can answer them a bit towards the end of the presentation. Let's first talk about what AeroCourse is, give you a little background on myself and my colleague, Francis. I'm a retired Air Canada captain. I retired off the A330. AeroCourse has been around for just coming up over 37 years now. All our instructors are airline pilots, actual airline pilots, which is very beneficial when we start talking about the advanced training. In fact, Brampton has asked us, and we've been doing it for many years now, to teach the IFR, the Instrument Rating Ground School, which is really, really important to give you a solid background on flying while under instruments. And what's interesting is that, as far as I know, Brampton is, if not the only, but very few schools actually use airline pilots to teach the instrument rating. Most schools use instructors that have never really flown a whole lot of instrument flying. So that's one of the big things that why we like to work with Brampton. They look to prepare professional pilots and ready when they leave the school to take on the responsibilities of being a professional pilot. So that's one thing. So that's my background. We've been doing advanced aviation seminars for those 37 years, and I am very lucky to have a whole host of very professional pilots and excellent instructors. Francis is one of them that he'll be talking to you about right now. He's a training captain for Sunwing. He's been flying jets, the 737, for years and years and years. So he's the kind of individual that we have that teaches you part of that multi-crew coordination training that Sydney was talking about. We're going to get into talking all about that now. So without further ado, there we are. So there's that was me flying a 767. That's Jessica, our manager of the IATPL program. She's actually just transitioning to captain on the 767, and there's Francis. So you'll see Francis in a second or so. As I said, we've been leaders in advanced aviation training for over 30 years. We've conducted thousands of ground schools and seminars. Our instructors are highly experienced professionals. Our mission is to provide students with the required knowledge they need to become safety-oriented professional pilots. We've been working with Brampton on this IATPL program now for 10 years. We build it on the success of the college program that they have been running for many, many years. And then we partnered up to create this joint training program and to provide an integrated ATPL pilot license program. Now, this is, I say, relatively new. It hasn't been around for that long. Which is kind of interesting, and I'll kind of explain to you why. The IATPL program is a very structured and intense program that takes students from zero-time flight hours to airline-ready IATPL graduates. So airline-ready means is they're very prepared once they start training at an airline or all level. They're completely trained to take on the responsibilities. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on that. So as Sydney mentioned, Brampton Flight College provides the flight training from the private, commercial, and up to the multi-engine IFR ratings. And once that's completed, then we take over, should you choose to take the IATPL, and we provide all that advanced training of the IATPL program. So why did Transport Canada introduce the IATPL program? Well, traditionally, years and years ago, long before we had the IATPL program, as we said, there was the initial flight training that took people up to the multi-IFR. And what the airlines found and Transport Canada found is that the airline pilot training required advanced knowledge, which was airline operations, aircraft systems, environmental operations, simulator training in large aircraft. And there was a training gap between what flight schools provide to what the airlines need. And if we go back many years when I got into the industry, traditionally what happened was is you would build up your flight time. You'd get your basic multi-engine IFR rating, and you would go out and build up some flight hours and gain of all kinds of experience. But over the last number of years, as Kathy mentioned, we've basically went into a real pilot shortage, and I suppose it started. I would say probably 7 or 8 years ago, and there still is a rapid growth in the airline industry. Uh, and the main reason is that people want to fly. They don't want to take buses or trains anymore. They want to get from point A to point B. So that's the big reason that we've seen this rapid growth of pilots in demand. So now traditionally, if you wanted to work for an airline like Air Canada or WestJet, you'd need somewhere between 4,000 or 5,000 hours. So you build up all kinds of experience before you went to the airline. Well, that's no longer the case. All those a number of hours have come down. In fact, as we mentioned, there's opportunities to at certain times to go straight to the airlines, and we saw that happening over the 2 or 3 years ago, and it's just been a rapid growth in pilot demand. So there wasn't enough pilots to supply the airlines, and so they were looking for a higher level of training. So what they ended up doing is they had to fill that training gap, and that's why Transport Canada introduced the integrated ATPL program. Um, and the main reason is in Canada is that um, we have a very large small aircraft industry that because we're so remote, we have such a small number, a vast number of communities that are very small. So to fly in and out, they can't support a large aircraft, so they have to use small aircraft. As compared to Europe, where they don't have that, you go straight to an airline. Your training starts or right in the initial training, and you go straight to the airline. And that's now just happening in Canada, and we're seeing that. So the other thing we found out is that because of that extra training that's provided by the IATPL, graduates significantly outperform their colleagues in initial airline courses. This table here kind of shows you what ends up happening. So at the top, these three things is the integrated ATPL program. They're all related. And this approved training organization is something that Transport Canada is mandating that to provide this integrated ATPL training, they have to be a training organization. It's not in place yet, but that's where they're going with it, from what we're hearing. And it's back to this very structured program that prepares pilots to go work for an airline. It is very successful, disciplined, prepared, studious, quality, and multi-crew competencies, and that's the big thing. The middle one in the darker blue here, gang, is that would be probably related to the college program. It is slightly lower. It has no multi-engine turbine experience, which means multi-engine jet experience or a large turboprop aircraft. Reasonable success, some bad habits, and mixed quality. And this blue one down in here is what we would call the self-paced, where it's mixed reviews, more bad habits, less consistent. Because it's self-paced, it's not structured. It's just the way the self-paced has always been. So I guess the moral of the story is that the airlines want to see people with the IATPL now, and that's the important part. They're seeing less training requirements, that they're able to get the IATPL graduates through the training program a little easier, and that's why they're pushing towards it. So, components of effective flight crew performance. So we build it much like we do with our cockpit resource management. So we provide airline operational procedures, advanced aircraft systems, because there's a huge difference between what you fly at a flight school as compared to what you're going to fly when you're even at a smaller medium airline and the large airlines. It's a huge difference in the advanced aircraft systems and the knowledge requirements. So we provide that. Crew procedures, standard operating procedures and checklists. This is all about safety of flight. Multi-crew CRM skills, personal proficiency. We instill that at every part of the IATPL program. So candidates graduate with the IATPL license. As Sydney said, it's a frozen IATPL, basically. So what it means is that once you write the exams, the two high-level ATPL exams, you have 5 years to get your licenses, but you have to have 1,500 hours. And but then you don't have to go back and study once you've got those 1,500 hours. You have the exams passed. So as soon as you get that number of hour requirements, you just apply for your license and you get it. And the other part is that advanced airline operational knowledge. We go way beyond what's required, even for the exams, to give you a solid background for what you need to know when you get to the airlines. Then we have this excellent multi-crew cooperation skills, which is a requirement of the IATPL program. So the advanced program consists of 2 phases of training. The first phase is the airline flight operations and airline transport license ground school training. And then the second phase is multi-crew cooperation training. So the program provides greater safety standards for young pilots through higher learning. That's the most important thing. We talk about flight operations procedures. We said aircraft systems for large aircraft, advanced communication and avionics. Then we talk about environmental factors, which is hazards that surround the environment, thunderstorms, freezing rain, all that kind of stuff. So we actually talk about the practical aspects as well as the theory behind it. So we're putting theory and practical aspects together to give you a base knowledge as how to handle this when you do get out and fly. So we said there's phase 1. It's approximately about 31 days, about 220 hours. There's 2 Transport Canada written exams, the SAMR and SARON, as we talked about. Then we have air carrier procedures and policies, Canadian air regulations, specifically the airline operations regulations, which are exceedingly extensive and complicated. We kind of break it down so when you go to the airlines, you know what to expect. Advanced communications and navigations and auto flight. This is huge right now. This is where we're talking about flight management computers, how you interface, how the pilot interfaces with all the onboard computers, and with that in regards to the cockpit resource management, to keep the aircraft not only a safe and efficient is the ultimate goal. So that's the big one we're talking about. And again, this is a huge difference compared to what's at the flight schools. And there's not too many flight schools that provide this kind of training and the background. Then we talk about environmental factors, advanced meteorology, high-level flight operations, hazardous conditions, theory of flight hazards. Then we get into the advanced aircraft systems. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a good background on aircraft systems. There's so many factors that come into it, and we don't have enough time to even touch the surface of why that's so important. So at this time, I'm going to let Francis take over, and he's going to talk about all the multi-crew coordination training.
Hello, everybody. My name is Francis. As Rick introduced me earlier, I'm one of the instructors that's worked for AeroCourse. I've been with AeroCourse now for, I don't know, I kind of lost count, at least 10 years. I'm also one of the main instructors at the integrated program at Brampton Airport. And I'm heavily involved in both the portion that Rick just talked about, preparing all the students to write their ATPL exams in addition to the extra work. And I'm also a big part of what we're calling here phase 2, which is arguably the more fun component and, of course, important component to prepare the students for the airline industry. So this portion here, which we call the multi-crew cooperation training or MCC training, includes two main requirements, basically to prepare the students in the classroom for flying large airplanes and working as a crew, because up till this point they've kind of been flying, other than with their flight instructors, by themselves. So now we have to teach them to work as a crew, which of course improves safety in an airplane, and it's basically what they'll be doing the rest of their career. The other component to this is preparing them to fly a big airplane, and the airplane that we're using in our curriculum is the 737-800 next generation, which is used by Sunwing Airlines, WestJet, and many other airlines around the world. It's probably the most common aircraft being used by the airlines. It's a pretty complex airplane, so of course the academics to it are pretty involved. So there's about 16 days in the classroom, which is mostly filled up with preparing them for complex aircraft systems, this particular aircraft systems, and onwards from there. And then we also teach them the crew and the teamwork portion of this multi-crew training. And this is all leading up to bringing the students into the actual simulators where they get to actually hone these skills and apply them. And of course, have some fun because they get to fly as close as you can get to the real airplane without actually getting onto the real airplane. The airline industry, of course, is getting busier and busier. There's more flights, there's more hours in the airplane. So, of course, we've already addressed the shortage. And it's also interesting that despite the fact that the number of flights have gone up in the world, the number of incidents or accidents is declining. And a big portion of this is this what's called CRM, or the using of crew resources, working together and applying that to mitigate hazards and reduce the number of accidents and incidents. So that's really the intention of multi-crew cooperation. It's not just, okay, go into a simulator, have some fun flying a big jet, and you're supposed to learn from that. The importance is how to effectively fly the airplane as a team. And we're going to throw these non-normals, these emergency procedures at the students in order to test them and show, hey, if you don't work together, then this minor or not so minor incident can lead to one of these problems. So the idea is to instill these habits, instill this practical application of this crew resource management so that they can take that into the industry. And this is something that is not really taught. When I got into the airlines, I was learning on the fly, and airlines expecting you to have this knowledge that was never taught to you. So one of our intentions was to make sure that we really apply this to the academics here. And one of the nice things about having AeroCourse doing this at Brampton is all the instructors are type rated on the 37 at this point. We are actual airline pilots, and no other school has the ability to do that because a lot of the times they're using their own on-staff instructors who may or may not have any experience beyond the flight school or the smaller aircraft. So we're using what we've learned in the industry. And as me being also a training captain at an airline, I've seen exactly what's been missing from our new hired pilots and that, and I'm hopefully trying to use that to, I don't know, make the Brampton students better, so to speak. A lot of the accidents and incidents that have happened in the industry, of course, many years ago, it was a variety of issues. Now the technical side of malfunctions and all this leading to accidents is almost nil. Now it seems to be it's more of a CRM. It's a crew issue more than it'll ever be a mechanical issue with an airplane. So included in phase 2, in addition to all the extensive systems that we're working on, we really want to talk about aviation psychology. There's a lot of it. Working as a crew and working with a stranger, because most of the pilots you fly with in the airlines, you may never met that person before, but you still have to effectively work together, is a really important part. We're trying to teach the psychology. We're trying to teach people how you can work with someone that you may or may not get along with, but still run an effective and a safe flight deck. The 737 ground school we put the students through is the exact same ground school as they would get if they were being hired to fly a 737. They're taking a full systems course, which includes avionics, flight management systems, how the autopilot works. And then in addition to that, we're going to give them SOPs, or standard operating procedures, in which they need to follow. And what a standard operating procedure is a way in which you are to fly the airplane. Not so much handling the airplane, but who's going to say what at certain times. When are you going to do these certain things that the other pilot is going to expect you to do? And that's how airlines allow two individuals that may not have ever flown together before to do it the exact same way all the time, so that you know that the stranger you're with is going to do it the way you would do it. So that's what we're trying to teach these students. Here's how these standard operating procedures, or SOPs, work. Here's how you're supposed to brief the other pilot on what you're about to do. And then, again, bring them into these simulators and actually apply that learning. Now, the simulator sessions themselves, and what really separates the Brampton program from every other school out there, are the exact simulators that the professional pilots are using. They can log the time. It's a certified simulator, where other schools have simulators which may function, but they're not certified, nor do they have the exact same level of detail that these other simulators may have. So they're going to get 8 4-hour sessions for a total of 32 hours in the simulator. We pair up the students with their sim partner, just like they would if they were being hired by a company. So you'd have one partner that you'd work with. You can study with them. You can work with them in the simulator. You can also study with the other students in the class. It's really encouraged. And they'll be basically assigned right at the beginning of the multi-crew and all the way through to the end of their simulators. Each sim session is conducted in a line-oriented flight training manual. They call it a LOF session, and it's a fancy term saying that they're basically going to conduct a flight from start to finish. Takeoff to landing from point A to point B, but on the way, we're going to introduce some non-normal scenarios, whether that's maybe inclement weather, maybe a malfunction on the airplane, or maybe the airport they're going to is closed, they have to find somewhere else. So we're giving these very realistic types of scenarios that as a crew they need to deal with, and we'll be sitting behind them in the simulators, evaluating them. And then afterwards, we could talk about their decision making, how they work together, how they handled the situation. And this all can be applied to their airline careers, because every flight is like that. The hope is every flight goes normal from point A to point D, but the reason they need to be trained is for when it isn't. Now, on this pictures here, you can see at the top, this is what would be called a flight training device. This would be what a lot of airlines would put new hired pilots in to first establish their habits, their SOPs, to first get them introduced to the aircraft prior to putting them into a full motion simulator, which you see here on the bottom right, where it replicates perfectly the flight deck, and it moves and creates the motion and sensations that you would have of flying. And this would be how pilots would normally be trained. The Brampton program, what we've done is we've actually taken the full flight training device, and we do it from start to finish. We avoid this computer monitor type of setup like you see here, because even I found this in my training at my company, that it's not as effective. It's less expensive, which is why it exists, but it's not as effective to teach the student, okay, here's how you actually manipulate the airplane and provide better training. This is not as negative training as much as this one can be, because it's so limited by the fact that it's just a bunch of screens. As for those standard operating procedures in the Brampton curriculum, as we've been allowed and offered by Sunwing Airlines to use their standard operating procedures. So the students will be provided with all the books, the paperwork, the procedures, basically all the documentation that a Sunwing pilot would have, and they're going to follow the procedures as if they were just hired at Sunwing Airlines. So all these things, everything from the forms they would fill out and their weight and balance paperwork and mathematics is all following the Sunwing procedures. And then we create our sessions or our scripts for these sim training sessions based on that. So this is the fun portion for the students, of course, because they actually get to apply everything they've been working towards over the last little while. Is this the end of mine, I believe, or do I keep going here?
You keep going, Francis.
I keep going? Okay. Sorry, I'm
I'll
not
help.
sure when I'm supposed to stop talking.
No, I'll help you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so like I said, the great thing about this integrated ATPL program, especially the one at Brampton, is the content of the material and the instructors doing it. If you were not to take an integrated program, you can still get your commercial license, and you can probably have a job right out of there up north, flying maybe in and out of some smaller airports, bringing the mail, cargo, maybe even doing what's called medevac, and working your way up, and through that progression, learning, which is the hope. But at some point, you're going to have to come back into the academics, and just writing the ATPL exams early in the integrated program at 200 hours instead of 750 really is a huge advantage to a student, because you can go up north for 3-4 years before you have 750 hours. And then you have to come back and you got to hit the books again. I got to learn all this stuff, and I haven't been in reading much of the textbooks. I haven't really been involved in that side of aviation. And now I have to go to Transport Canada and write these two pretty intense exams. And then you still don't actually have the hours required to get the ATPL license. You got to go back up north or find another job until you get those 1,500 hours you need to actually get the ATPL signed off. And most airlines are looking for their pilots to at least have the airline transport pilot's license if you're going to be hired to an airline, because it shows them that, okay, this individual has reached both the experience and the knowledge level that we would be willing to give them a chance. But through the integrated program, the academics are right through. You're completing these ATPL exams, and you're going to be that much more prepared for the airlines at a lower hour threshold. The multi-crew training at this point for airlines, if they're going to look at anybody without the ATPL, there wouldn't be a question. They wouldn't look at you without the multi-crew component being done, because they want to know, okay, if I'm going to be hiring an individual with lower experience, they need to at least have these advantages, these things that we'd be missing otherwise. This program prepares these students. I would say you get to skip 5 years worth of flying experience by doing an integrated program. That would be my guess, based on how many hours you would get in a year flying for a smaller operation up north. So these are the things basically that we include in our program that you wouldn't find anywhere else. Assumed knowledge, I would say. Airlines at this point would assume that their candidates would have accrued this knowledge through their flying experience. But if you don't have any flying experience, it's up to us to teach you those. So advanced navigation, flight management systems, airborne weather radars. Most small airplanes don't have weather radar, so when are you going to learn how to use it? And then, of course, that crew aspect in CRM. And like I said, these are the things that airlines are looking for. Things that are not taught in most schools. They're certainly not taught when you are up north flying in these small operations, because you're just learning you're learning the hard way, I suppose is the best way to put it. Pretty much covered this already. And of course, all of our instructors involved in the program are active airline pilots or retired like Rick, and have all been type rated on the airplane. So these are all individuals that have actually flown the 737 or are actively flying the 737. They are the ones teaching these classes. We don't have any low time pilots or pilots that haven't had that opportunity at all in their careers, which is huge, because this is a plethora of knowledge that the students can draw upon. And I get all kinds of really practical questions. It's very simple. Hey, where should I apply after this type of questions, even, that most couldn't answer if they haven't actually been through that. We do all the sim instruction for the most part as well. Our instructors are going into the flight training devices to do the instruction. If they're not instructing, they're in the back monitoring the sessions while other qualified trainers are doing it. It depends. CAE, the facility where we do our simulator training, they have their own type-rated qualified instructors that do the actual sim sessions. The fixed base stuff that we do is done by all of our own instructors.
I think, Francis, if I could interject here for a second.
Yep.
One of the things that is important is just to talk about our instructors' experience. As we said, Francis is a training captain. We have check pilots, which is the pilot that actually does the flight test in the simulator. We have flight operations managers or chief pilots. I was a chief pilot at Canadian Regional way back when. So back to what Francis says, we have an enormous amount of experience that we can pass on that information, which we think is really, really important.
That's what sets it apart for sure. For sure. All right, I think we mentioned a lot of this stuff already. The program is recognized under the Ontario Private Career Colleges Acts. If you choose to go down the integrated ATPL program, it's about 20 months from start to finish. It is a little bit longer of a program, but in that extra time, you are covering a plethora of information. It's a lot of ground school, a lot of studying, a lot of learning, and it is not easy, but it is incredibly rewarding. And I am so proud of the graduates that get through this. To see them and what they become by the end of it, I would have no problem flying with any of them based on what they've achieved. It's really impressive. Saw this slide a little bit earlier with Rick talking about all of the components of an effective crew, and you need to have all this stuff. A lot of people think flying is all about flying the airplane, but the majority of it is not. It's academics, it's how you work with others and how you follow procedures. What was that, Rick? Sorry?
I was just going to say, the reason why we put the slide back in is that we asked one of our students what, after they finished the IATPL program, who's now working at the airlines, what they thought. And basically, if you can just hit the slide there, Francis, the advance. There's all these threats, and this we call this the Swiss cheese model, prevents that. So if you get through what it is to get to an incident, we asked what the student thought, and basically this was his exact words, was this: there's the layers of safety, but it allowed him to make better decisions, is what the big thing was. And that's the whole thing. We teach safety of flight. That's the single most important thing you talk about any airline. It's all about safety of flight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The Swiss cheese model, if you've never heard of it, these are all pieces of cheese. See with the holes in it like Swiss cheese. And if all the holes line up and you allow an incident or something to get through all those holes and nobody catches it or nothing catches it, it could lead to an accident or incident. So the hope is by having all these layers of protection that you won't have the holes of the Swiss cheese lined up, and it'll never get to that point. That's where the whole Swiss cheese model comes from. Anyways, before I finish talking and pass it off, I got a couple of videos here just to give you an example of the kind of training and how our students graduate and what they're capable of. So the first video here is, I believe it's you, Rick. This is an Air Canada flight, an actual departure being filmed from the jump seat. And what I want everybody to listen to and watch in the video is to see the way their standard calls. Both pilots have certain things that they're saying at certain times. It's very structured, it's very organized, it's very professional. And these are the important aspects of airline flying that we teach to the students. After you watch Rick do it in a professional airline operation, I have another video of our graduates from last year doing the exact same thing. And you shouldn't see any differences at all, because that's exactly the goal, is they should be at that standard by the time they complete the program. All right, so here we go.
It's going to be V1161, VR164, V2169. We're LNAVing. up to 7,000 feet. No turns below 3,600. Lose the engine at 90 and me, we're going to go 330 up to 5,400 feet.
Roger that. Clear to line up only, clear right.
Clear left. Right? The run up?
60%, yep. This is a release to reflect 59.2. So we have a release form.
Excellent, thank you. Just going to hit the brakes manual. Okay, all set?
All set.
Why don't you let them know we're ready to go?
Canada 009, we're ready to go to the front left. (24.5) to the aircraft, takeoff runway 35 left, Air Canada 009.
And one.
Thrust set. 80.
Roger.
V1, rotate.
Thrust, command center. N1, VNAV speed.
Roger. Purchase Windsor, Canada 009, 5.2.
All right, so there you go. That was Rick departing on the 767, and you can hear there's a lot of standard calls, things that they were saying to each other. They both knew exactly what the next one was going to do, and it's all because they're following these standard operating procedures. Now, this video is our graduates from last year's college program. They're in the full motion simulator, so you'll hear them talking to each other. You'll also hear a voice in the background, which is the instructor. He's acting as air traffic control for the session. So this is at CAE here in Toronto. In this particular video, the pilot who's flying the aircraft is actually in the right seat, the first officer, but you'll see it's the exact same dynamic as what we saw in that Air Canada flight.
We'll be doing flaps 5 and 1 of 94.9%. We're doing the Thunder Bay 1 departure, so back to 4,000, and then engine out. We'll be climbing to cleanup speed 1660 and climbing to 4,000 and assessing from there. Questions, comments, concerns?
No, let's go before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist, flaps,
5 green light,
stabilizer trim,
4.9 knots.
before takeoff checklist.
Subway 222, clear to line up, wait, runway 07.
Summon 222, clear to line up and rate 07. Alright, I'm going to take train.
Okay, I have weather. Thank you. Subway 222, Windsor 04010. You can contact departure once you're airborne on 109.2. Clear for takeoff, runway 07.
Clear for takeoff 07, contact departure 119.2, sunwing 222.
And you have control.
I have control. Please. And takeoff.
Runway 07 verified.
And one photo.
Press set. 80 knots.
V1.
Rotate. Pause it brake.
Zero. Unlock.
Check.
VS speed.
Departure sunwing 222 with you 1,400, climbing 4,000. Sunwing 222, ready to continue climb 7,000 feet for sunwing 222. 7,000, sunwing 222.
And one.
And 7,000 feet.
And Bravo. Last one. 7,000 set.
Sunwing 222, you can proceed now direct Yankee Sierra Papa, climb 8,000 feet. Yankee Sierra Papa, climb 8,000 feet, sunwing 222.
8,000 set.
Check.
You put Sierra Yankee Papa.
Confirm direct Yankee Sierra Papa.
Execute. And after takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist, engine plates on, packs, auto, landing gear, up and off, flaps up, no lights, after takeoff checklist.
That's it. So you can see very similar, if not better than you, Rick.
Okay, Francis. They're very good.
Yeah, no, they did awesome. But you can see how it's so similar, and despite being Sunwing SOPs versus Air Canada, that was a 737. Rick was flying the 767. There's so many similarities to prepare them for the industry. It's a fantastic program. This just goes over the active pilots and the room for growth in the industry moving forward. There are other avenues. This training still prepares a student equally well for corporate flying, cargo flying, of course. It really doesn't matter what's in the back of the airplane. It's still important knowledge to get into the industry, to fly professionally and in a crew environment. The shortages around the world, Canada and the US looking for an additional 65,000 pilots in the next 10 years. That was from a few years ago. The industry is very quickly changing. The demand's up and down. It's looking for pilots all over the world. The training applies everywhere. This multi-crew is already an established training method in Europe. They've been doing it this way for a very long time because they just don't have the small airplane opportunities for pilots to get experience. So we're trying to, this is, like Rick said, this bridges the gap here for Canadian flight training. And of course, it still looks good. Now, a couple of other important things are what's called pathway or cadet programs, and the program of Brampton is affiliated with. So if you are in the integrated program, we do have some programs available for the graduates. The first one is what's called the Jazz Pathways program. So graduates of the program that have an average of 80% or more on the Transport Canada ATPL exams and they meet certain criteria, obviously do well in an interview, have all the proper hours and so forth, and licensing, can have an interview with Jazz for a first officer position. They do hire graduates with 250 hours or more. Now you might be wondering where the 250 hours comes from versus the 200 hours required for a commercial license. One added requirement to fly a two-crew airplane is you also need to have 250, not just the 200-hour requirement. This is part of holding what's called a type rating, which means you're licensed to fly that particular type of airplane. So transport mandates, if you want to fly and hold a type rating, you don't just need 200 hours, you need 250 hours in addition to all the extra exams and training. So
If I could,
Jazz is offering IATPL graduates 2 awards with these interviews right now. So the top 2 graduates. There's also the Professionalism and Diversity Award that they present, and these are all done at the graduation ceremony where the students will find out who actually got these awards from Jazz.
one of the things, Francis, we should say is that in addition to Sunwings giving us permission to use all their manuals and their checklists and all that, we also had the same with Jazz, and we ended up having to switch to Sunwing because of the simulator was no longer available to us at CAE. They actually moved the simulator to Montreal, so that's why we went to the 37. And so for the airlines to trust us with their manuals, I guess the point is it's so important that they trust us on our training so that they allow us to use their manuals, which really kind of signifies just how the relationship that we have with these airlines, and they know what kind of candidates we provide. Now, there was a question that somebody asked about how many pilots gets hired out of the airlines or out of the school right to the airlines. As I mentioned earlier on, there was at one point in time, there was a whole bunch of first officers being hired right out of some of the IATPL schools, and we were one of them. But there has been, because they hired so many first officers, they have too many first officers right now. So they've had to slow down the hiring of first officers with very low time, because they're hiring more people with higher time right now. And again, they would prefer, if you have higher time, that you have an IATPL so they can move them up to captain. Because right now they have way too many first officers for captains, and we're actually doing ground schools for the ATPL for a number of airlines right now, because they hired a bunch of people without the IATPL and they haven't written their exams, and they need to write their exams before they can upgrade to captain. So we're working with 2 airlines right now and a third one shortly. So it gives you an idea of how they feel about AeroCourse in general, because they call us to do this training for them. So just mentioning that. And Sydney, if you have anything to add in on the pathway program, kiddo?
No, I think Francis covered it. Francis will also talk about our other 2 partnerships with Peru as well as Sunwing,
Yeah, exactly.
which we often get a lot of questions about. So if there's any other questions after Francis is done covering it, I'm more than happy to help clarify.
All right, the next one is Destination Porter. Porter Airlines, of course. Graduates of our IATPL program are accepted into Destination Porter Mentoring Program. The mentoring program means the student will be paired up with a Porter airline pilot, an actual pilot and employee of Porter, for guidance in career development. Once the graduate has accumulated a minimum of 500 hours, they have the option to interview at Porter Airlines for a first officer position there. Now, the 500-hour minimum is a requirement of Porter. That's where that number comes from. And it's a good opportunity to have, beyond graduating, access to an airline pilot that they can talk to, they can ask for advice, and then get, of course, their own guidance, and hopefully even progress into an interview and a job at Porter Airlines afterwards. Again, at the graduation ceremony, a scholarship from Porter Airlines presented to the graduate called the Porter Star Award. Then lastly, the Sunwing Cadet Partnership. So Sunwing, of course, is the SOPs. Everything that the students are doing in the MCC portion of their training is revolving around Sunwing and the way things are done at Sunwing Airlines. Graduates of the IATPL program can be accepted into the Sunwing Cadet Partnership Program and get interviewed and potentially enter as a first officer there, with, of course, a minimum of 250 hours, because like I said, you will have to hold a type rating on the airplane, which means 250 hours minimum. Now, I'll be honest, a lot of the graduates, even the ones that are about to graduate this year, are pretty close to that already. The extra flying they may have done throughout their flight training went beyond the 200. So it's really not a huge leap. It may not be anything extra at all for the graduate to have the 250 hours. So it's not unreasonable at all. Now, Sunwing offers IATPL graduates 2 awards and the interview opportunities. The 2 awards, again, are presented at the graduation ceremony. They call them the Uplift Awards. Yeah, we had 2 from last year who got it. Now I believe it's back to you, Sydney. Is that right?
It is. Okay,
All right.
thank you. Thank you, AeroCourse teams. I am sorry about that, everyone. I lost internet connection. Can everyone see my screen again?
Yes, we can see
your
it,
screen and hear
Sydney.
you better.
Yeah, okay, all good. Okay, sorry about that. So I will just start back from the beginning. So as I was trying to say, as a career college, students will submit their application online directly through our website. So you will not apply through the standard college or university application portal. It's directly on our website, bramptonflightcentre.com. You can just search IATPL program and the link will come up, or you can click under the red Fly With Us tab. You'll click IATPL or college, depending on what program you want to apply for. And you will pay the application fee. So that is $100 plus tax. That covers the cost of myself and Kathy reviewing your application, as well as doing the interview and entrance quiz and processing all of the interview outcomes. To apply to the program, once you've paid the $100 fee, you will input your invoice number for this application fee and submit the documents. So you will submit evidence of your Category 1 medical. So as Scott was saying at the beginning of the presentation, this Category 1 medical can take several months for Transport Canada to actually process once you've gone in for your appointment. So because of this, we are accepting some type of evidence that you've at least completed the appointment. For example, a receipt from the Civil Aviation Medical Examiner showing you did your appointment in December of 2024, and you're now waiting on Transport Canada to process that application. The second set of documents we'll need will be your transcripts from your current or past educational institutions. With this, I say the more the merrier. If you're a college graduate, you're more than welcome to also upload your high school transcript as well. However, we require at least your highest level of education, so university or high school, university or college, or high school for direct from high school applicants. We also require 2 letters of reference. I should clarify that these should be professional letters of reference. So someone who knows you in a professional capacity, whether that's a past or current employer, potentially someone who knows you from an educational sense, whether that might be a teacher, a guidance counselor, or something like that. At the very worst case scenario, you could use the personal reference. However, professional references are preferred. And that being said, we do want them to be current letters of reference. So within the past year, we wouldn't want anything older than 2024. So if you could have that updated within the past year. Next, in addition to that letter of reference, we would also want you to update your current resume, just to give us a background on kind of what you've been up to. Maybe you're a student, maybe you've been working for several years. This just gives us a background on our applicants. And finally, a 2 to 3 page narrative about yourself. So this is a paper that we use, again, to just get to know the candidate a little bit better outside of the documents they submit for the application and outside of the kind of formal application interview process. So this is a way for us to understand why you might want to get into flying, why you think the IATPL would make a good fit for you, We also hope that you will talk about the types of flying you'd like to do. So as we've mentioned in the program, there's potential for direct entry to the airlines, but not all of the IATPL graduates will get direct entry. So if you don't get direct entry, what type of flying would you like to do? Do you want to be a medical pilot flying up north? Would you prefer to be a flight instructor and, teach the next generation of pilots? So that's why we have a narrative, is for you to kind of tell us about yourself and why you would like to join the program. The last component you would submit for your application would be evidence of having completed at least 0.5 hours of of flight training. So essentially, this means having completed an introductory or what's called a discovery flight. So as Scott talked about, Brampton Flight Centre offers these introductory flights. However, we're more than happy for you to complete this intro flight at another school. We just need to have some type of evidence that it was completed at a flight school. So for example, if you have a friend and you've been up in a small aircraft, we do want to see some type of formal evidence that you actually got some type of training and sort of formal feel for it. So we're hoping to see some type of receipt for that evidence. And once you submit that application, we will take a few days to look it over, your documents, see if there's anything you might be missing from your application. And if your application is accepted and you meet all admission requirements, we will invite you into Brampton Flight Centre for an in-person interview as well as a quiz. So I will invite you via email, and this quiz will assess your kind of basic math skills, your English comprehension, and simple Canadian geography understanding. So this entrance quiz we use in addition to your application package as well as the interview. And we use these three things to kind of help us make our admission decision on whether or not you might be a good fit for this IATPL program. In terms of the interview, that's done by myself and my manager, Kathy, who's also on the call this evening. And together we make the admission decisions for this IATPL program and college program. And I will pass it over now to Kathy to just talk about the costs of the program as well as the financing options for Brampton Flight Centre.
Thanks, Sydney. So many of you in the chat have been asking about the cost. So the college, again, you're looking at approximately $75,000. The IATPL is $97,000, and of course, there's tax on top of that. We have to also take into consideration that flight training is skill-based, not hourly-based. So we do ask our students to put in a little bit of a budget or a buffer of approximately $5,000. Just in case they have confidence issues or they need to repeat lessons. We are not OSAP eligible, so many of our students that come to us have either been working for a few years or they're able to get a loan. Parents also assist the students. When it comes to scholarships, those are typically applied for when you're in the program, and the amounts are usually very low, maybe around $1,000. So although it is nice to have that, it's not going to cover a lot. And someone just in the chat is asking how many applicants do we accept. So I'm just going to skip around. I do apologize. We take 30 students, and it doesn't matter which program they apply to and or are accepted into. Some quick facts about our diploma programs. So we're going to start this July on the 7th, and you can apply up until March 16th. And as I just mentioned, 30 students is what we take. And we usually have a high volume of applications. And if you're looking at the picture on the screen right there, some of you in the chat were asking about, well, how do I get hired at an airline? I don't have 500 or 1,000 hours like they're advertising, but the gentleman on the right is Damon, and he is a graduate from the IATPL program, and he went direct entry to Sunwing as a first officer. So he did not have, to my knowledge, 1,000 hours. Maybe Francis or Rick could shed a little more light on that.
He came right from the program.
I should,
Yes,
if I could.
okay, perfect. I'm not missing.
No,
Yeah.
no, Kathy, if I could add in, traditionally, Sunwing was far in advance of all the other airlines. Sunwing was the only one airline, large airline, that flew large airplanes that took in cadets, as far as I know, in Canada, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The only other companies that did cadet programs similar to it were smaller regional type of aircraft. Still large aircraft, still
Yeah,
a big leap for a graduate, but
yeah.
the first jet operating airline to do cadet programs and bring in cadet graduates was Sunwing for sure.
Yeah. So traditionally, gang, what happens is, and we never really talked about that, was the if the, as I mentioned, they're right now, all the regional carriers that we talked about, that size of the up to the 75, 85 seats, from, you know, from the 20 to 85 seats, none of them are hiring right now directly. Oh, I shouldn't say that. There's a couple that are hiring directly with low time pilots, but not the ones that you would think. Jazz, because as I said, they have a lot of extra first officers right now, and that's gonna change once they can upgrade those first officers to captains. And that's what they're promoting. And Encore is doing the same. They've got too many first officers that they have to upgrade to captain. So that's happening in the industry. So right now they're hiring, as we said, more pilots that have more time. But again, they prefer to take higher time pilots with the IATPL over non IATPL programs. Not we're trying to push it hard. That's just the fact, is that because they have that FMS training and have that fantastic multi-crew training that Francis and Jessa and their team have put together. So that's the reason why, is just because they do better in sim training. But the young lady that you saw um, in the video that Francis put up, she got a job flying a fairly sophisticated medevac aircraft. So she's building up all kinds of time. And so that's the two options: go north and get a fly a smaller aircraft, build up your time, and then you move up the ladder, or you become a flight instructor and build up your time. But they still prefer pilots to have that multi-crew coordination training. So, and we get that straight from the high level flight ops managers from these regional carriers. I don't think we'll ever see WestJet or Air Canada hire direct entry pilots like they do in Europe and in Asia, but that's the state of it. So, sorry, long-winded way of saying that's how it works.
All right, thanks, Rick. And then just the last point is that we do have a high graduation rate. Because our class size is small, we're able to help our students and support them when required. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation now. So that's the end of all of these scheduled slides. So if you don't have any questions, feel free to exit the presentation. But if you do have any questions, feel free to send them along in the chat. Or if you want to ask them verbally, I will ask that you please raise your virtual hand, and I will kind of answer them in the order that the hands are raised. So I don't see any currently, but if you want to, feel free to send in the chat. I'll just cover some kind of general questions I've been seeing. A lot of questions about international students specifically. So in the past, Brampton Flight Centre has accepted international students. We have currently several international students currently enrolled at Brampton Flight Centre in both our integrated and college programs, as well as our self-paced program. So it's definitely something that we have done in the past. However, we do have a high volume of students currently, and can't guarantee all of the students that we have interested in training the ability to facilitate full-time training for all of them. And so because of that, we've paused accepting international students. Now, with that being said, we have not paused it indefinitely. It is something that we are looking to continue in the future. It's just that we don't have an estimated timeline on when that might resume. in the future. So realistically, I don't think it will resume for this next college or IATPL intake, meaning that we likely won't have an opportunity for international students to join the 2025 intake, but we are hoping that the status of that will change for the next intake. Okay, so I see a few hands raised, so I will just answer, I'll call out your name in the order that I see them. So first, I'll start off with Solomon's question. Apologies if I have mispronounced your name.
You did perfect. Okay. So a quick one, actually.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid, actually, what is the options to withdraw from the program if for whatever reason?
Yeah, that's a great
What would be
question.
the cost? What would be the process in summary?
Definitely. Yeah, so it does depend on the IATPL program is quite restrictive in that if you need to pause, you aren't able to kind of resume or readmit into the IATPL program, but that doesn't mean you can't accomplish the same licenses through the self-paced program. So if we have someone who needs to take a pause for an extended duration of time, what would happen is they would likely self-withdraw from the IATPL program and resume their flight training through our self-paced program whenever it is they're able to resume. So sometimes that might mean, a month down the line. Sometimes that might mean a year down the line. So you're right that people do have kind of individual circumstances. So unfortunately, with the kind of benefits and perks that the IATPL program does provide, it is quite restrictive in that it does not allow for many breaks or pauses in the program.
Right, but my question is, if for whatever reason, again, circumstances happens that I want to completely just continue this program, would I be asked to pay the full price or the full cost for the program, or
Yeah,
how?
so in terms of the payment structure, you don't pay all of this money all up front. So if you were to have to pause the program, it wouldn't be a matter of calculating a refund for all $97,000. You pay what's called tuition installments, and then everything else is done. You pay for each flight after you land. So you're not doing a large lump sum payment at one point. So there wouldn't be a matter of doing a large refund calculation. In terms of being able to resume in the IATPL program, you can only start this program with a certain amount of experience. So it would depend essentially on where you stopped this program from. So if you stopped the program a couple months in before you accomplished the PPL, in theory, you could reapply and resume the program the following year and accomplish your PPL and CPL and everything else through the program. However, if you if you paused the program at the point of, let's say, your IFR training, at that point, you would likely be considered too experienced for the IATPL program and you would need to repeat too much. So it wouldn't make sense for you to join the program again at that point. So it does kind of depend on what point of the program you will have stopped at. So it's a little hard to answer that question, but at the end of the day, even if you need to pause your training in the IATPL program, you can still get your commercial multi-IFR licenses through Brampton Flight Centre. However, the structure of that might look different and you might not get access to the SAMRA and SARON exams that the IATPL program do provide.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next hand up I see on my screen is Daniel Dimitrov.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. I think one of the team members actually answered my question because I also posted it in the chat, but I don't know if you want to answer it as well or if someone else wants to chime in. Essentially, I was just curious if the
what was it?
IATPL Yeah, I was just curious if the IATPL program would be a suitable choice for someone starting from zero, looking to focus in corporate slash charter aviation versus the airline. So obviously the type ratings at the end would be different, but there are a lot of valuable aspects in the program as well. So I was curious on your thoughts there, and also if you know of any students that have gone that route, that gone went the corporate aviation versus the airlines at the end.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, yeah, please do, Rick.
Yes, a lot of the corporate airplanes have the exact same uh, advanced avionics as the airliners have. So the IATPL prepares you well for that, and we had a number of pilots end up flying corporate jets and over the corporate turboprops and corporate jets over the years in a very large charter operation. So yeah, I'd say it's beneficial. Uh, they aren't as, I shouldn't say that the corporate world hasn't dug in as deep as the airlines on how important the IATPL is, although we're hearing feedback that their eyes are opening to it. So if that makes sense, Daniel, yes.
Okay, perfect. No, that was a great explanation. And then do you guys have any I guess connections with any of the local providers or in terms of, I guess, like
You
finding
mean
work
corporate?
opportunities afterwards or Mhm.
Yeah, well, it's uh we do know one that's hired two or three of our graduates, but we haven't had time to reach out to them and see if we can do a better connection for them going through. Um, so yeah, that's the basic answer.
Okay, no worries. No, that was a perfect answer. So it is a program that you would recommend for someone that's seeking that career path.
Yeah, I mean, in the corporate world is really hard. Depends on what type of corporate flying you want to do. Um, Over the years, I can tell you that if it's a charter operation, they're pretty stable, meaning they have corporate aircraft that they charter out. But
Mhm.
what we didn't mention is there's peaks and valleys in this industry.
For sure.
And right now we've been the longest peak I've ever seen, and it's still continuing. At some point in time, it's going to go back down, and there won't be hiring. But when that is, who knows? There's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. The basically the economies. So from a corporate point of view, if it's an aircraft for an actual company. When the economy goes down, the first thing to go normally is the corporate jet. But we're seeing more
Yeah.
what we call fractional ownership, where it's
Mhm.
not there. And the problem when they had years gone by is that when they had just a corporate aircraft for, let's say, a Bank of Montreal, they didn't use the airplane that much. So it was
Mm.
easy to get rid of it. But now with this, what we call fractional ownership, where they have two or three people on the aircraft, it's much more cost effective, right? So that's why they do it.
Mhm. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Rick. I
Sure.
appreciate the webinar. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Sydney, are you
Okay,
there?
next, yeah, I am. Next hand I see is Syed.
Yeah, hi Sydney. Thank you so much. So, you've been actually helping me a lot with my questions over the email. I just want to like clarify like two or three more questions, since I'm on call for this webinar. So the first question is that I have is that regarding the
Yeah.
transcript. So I will be finishing my university degree in April, right? And most of my courses are in from university are in economics, but I did took physics and mathematics and calculus at university level in high school. So I'm not sure which transcript should I upload, should it be like the high school one or the one that I did in university?
Sydney? I can kind of
Sure,
give you
sure, sure,
give you an overview.
sure.
I can
Um,
help too if you need it.
yeah, so Kathy, chime in just after what I say that would be really good. But overall, and the post-secondary education, it really doesn't, to the airlines, and this is important that, if you have a post-secondary, how important it is to have that, because all they want to know is that you have the ability to learn.
Right, right,
And the biggest misinformation out there is that the airlines and flight schools want that's heavy in mathematics and physics and all that. That's not really the case. They want you to be able to learn, and generally college or university proves to the fact to the airlines and our program that you're capable of learning. That's really what it's about.
right.
Um, you know, um,
So
so
just like for like sorry, like just for the application purposes, like should I upload like my high school? Because on my high school only like contains like grade 12 like courses, but my university is like for all 4 years. So should I upload like both or like just like one of them, either of them?
that's a Kathy
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
Hi, guys.
for,
I'm
for
back
sure.
on, by the way, everyone. Sorry about that. My internet again.
Yeah, no worries.
No
Kathy?
problem. So just for Saeed, you'd be more than welcome to submit both sets of transcripts. However, if you're a university graduate, we would probably focus on those.
Right. Thank you so much. And then the other question that I had was regarding uh, the two current letters of references that was requested when I was like filling up the application. So that can be like, like any of my university professors, or like, is it like has to be someone specific?
Your professors would be a great choice. If they can share with us why you'd make a great candidate, we'd really appreciate that.
Right, right, right. Thank you so much. One last thing that I want to ask you is that I already like enrolled myself for the introductory flight. Although like it's scheduled on like first of February. So the receipt that I got from like the like the pilot shop, like is that sufficient to apply, or like once I get done with my introductory flight, then I can like f submit the receipt.
Yes. So once you actually finish the actual flight, that's proof that you did it, because sometimes the reservation may not actually go because of the weather. So
Okay, okay,
we
okay.
do ask that you just give us the receipt after.
Receipt after. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. That's all I had. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Perfect. Okay. I will take the next question, who I see is David.
All right, thanks very much for hosting this webinar. I have a few questions. Myself, I'm an older student. I'd be 45 this year. So I'm just wondering, is that too late to start a career in aviation? The other part, I guess, to that is I'm wondering if I'm going to spend about 100,000 to get the licenses, what is the salary progression? Like at what point would I'm just trying to figure out when I would kind of break even, and even if it's in the more junior roles, let's say.
Yeah, that's a great question. So firstly, I wouldn't say you're too old. You would definitely be on the more mature scale of our candidates. However, we have typically at least two, I would say, in each intake of individuals who are joining this as a second or even potentially third career. So, they're leaving an established position, whether it might be in the real estate industry, the financial industry. We have lots of engineers applied to this program. And, they haven't found passion in what they've found success in a career. And so they look to join this program. And it's a good option because it's such an accelerated route for you. So the only thing I would say to a mature candidate would be consideration that the airlines obviously do have a time frame in terms of retirement age. However, that is kind of an evolving discussion. And the other thing to consider is there are other career opportunities beyond just airlines. If flying is something you want to do beyond the airline retirement age. So we have several instructors active at flight instructors at Brampton Flight Centre who are well beyond the airline retirement age and enjoy very successful careers as flight instructors. So as long as you're kind of aware of that, I wouldn't say you're too old or that it's too late to start. In terms of your salary progression question, I feel like Rick might be better suited to answer that. However, with what experience I have, I do know that your salary obviously grows with your experience and with your career. So those first positions obviously are not going to be the most high paying when you're a low hour pilot trying to build those hours. Your salary grows with experience. So once you've, gone through years of experience, whether it's through the airlines as a flight instructor, whatever it might be, that is when your salary begins to grow and you make that investment that you've made in this program back. Would you have anything to add on to that, Rick? Or Francis?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you want to end up. I mean, Air Canada, WestJet do hire senior pilots or older pilots, I should say. But it depends on their experience level. And it depends on what they're hiring. But what we did find out is that my general thought process is the retirement is 65 as it stands now. I don't know if that's going to change or not. It's a tough one. There's a number of different reasons. So basically, you're giving yourself about 20 years, but you got to do your training and get in there. But the initial job, let's say, it's anywhere as low as 50,000 to start to 70 to 75. But depending where you're at, it can progress to fairly fast up what we call up the food chain, and it's based, as Sydney says, it's a seniority base. Year one, you're paid this. Year two, you're paid that. Year three, you're based that. But traditionally, the first 2 or 3 years is low pay, and then it starts to really increase. But one of the things that some of the smaller regional carriers really like is having older pilots because they're not destined to head off to the airlines. So it's kind of interesting because then if they can keep somebody till they need retirement at a Jazz or an Encore or something, that's pretty good. I mean, a company like Flair hires mature pilots because they know they're going to stay in those type of operations. So it's really all over the map, if that helps, David.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that was my concern. I thought, if they see a more mature candidate coming, they're going to know I can only work for 20 more years.
Yeah, that was a big thing before, but they've really kind of moved away from that. As a matter of fact, they want to hire people at different ages so they don't end up as they are now, where everyone's retiring at once. Air Canada's retirement is just huge every year because they hired everyone in the same age group 30 or 35 years ago, and now we're all retiring all at once. So they decided about 10 or 12 years ago that they weren't going to do that again, and then they're hiring various people at different age groups. So
I see, super. And one other with the class 1 medical, if you have a class 1 medical, would an airline have an even higher degree of qualification, or is the class 1 medical the top level?
no, the airlines, generally speaking, have a more in-depth medical. They do the blood work, they do a whole bunch of other stuff, they do psychological testing. So it is a lot more advanced than the typical Cat 1 medical that your CMAE gives you. They're, although,
Many don't though, Rick. Sunwing,
yeah,
WestJet, it's
yeah,
the same Cat 1 medical.
yeah. On the initial, Francis?
Yep.
Okay.
I see the same medical examiner I've seen for years.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's in reality, they're not really allowed. If you hold a Cat 1 medical, they can't say no to you. You just don't know if they can. That's under the human rights. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, next question from Jason.
Yeah, thank you. great information today. I really appreciate all this information. David actually asked two of my most important questions that I was going to ask, which was the age group, more mature person that's looking to get into the aviation. Just to add on to that, when it comes to the medical, what are some reasons where they would deny or refuse you for obtaining the medical or moving on or taking the next step? What are some reasons that they would deny it? That's my question.
There's not many. I mean, um, really something neurological, um, anything related heart, that can't be corrected. Uh, there's a lot less things that they turn down pilots for now than they used to, with the advancement in the medical community. People are living much longer, so it's not as it was before. When I got into it, you couldn't wear glasses, and then they changed that. So it's really, um, I guess, Francis, color blindness, I think, is one of the ones for
Yeah, a
eyes
lot of
that I
them,
know
what
of.
they'll do, if you do your initial medical and they discover something, color blindness is a perfect example. Before they just flat out say you'll never hold a clap one in your life, they can ask you to go see a more specialized examiner and then
Yeah.
do some further testing, go up the food chain of transport, and it's absolutely possible that it might take longer, of course, but you could get a Cat 1 medical. I know a pilot who was colorblind. They just did some additional testing to see, okay, he's colorblind, but can he differentiate the important stuff? And after some additional testing, he was approved. So it's not necessarily that they'll ever give you a flat out no, never. They just might make you jump through a few more hoops. So it's still quite possible.
Well, the big one is epilepsy.
Yeah.
Seizures. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You guys answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, I will move on to the next question. Hannah?
Thank you so much. So, I will be a recent graduate, a high school graduate this year, and I was looking into a career in aviation, but I wanted to get a university degree like right after high school. So, I was wondering if I should take a program during university, like a self-paced one, or if I should do something like an IATPL after university. But if I do this, I will graduate at 24 approximately. So when would I get to the airlines, and would this be the right path? Because I heard it is better to start earlier because of seniority.
Can I speak to
That's
this one, Rick?
Yeah, go ahead, Francis.
All right, Hannah. Well, I did the exact same thing. After I graduated high school, I went to university. I took engineering and graduated. And then I chose from then to go and take the college program at Brampton, where I was a graduate. This was before the IATPL, so it was just the regular college program. And I chose it just because I was concerned, like you, okay, I'm going to be 24 years old and I want to get into the industry as quickly as possible. I started doing it self-paced before. I can't say it gave me an advantage in the program or anything. I ended up graduating at almost the same time as everyone else, but it could help to start doing some flying ahead of time if you can handle it with your post-secondary education. I don't think I could have done engineering and fly at the same time. It would have been too much for me. But I did the same route. I don't think there's a right answer. You could absolutely start beforehand and do it, or you can wait till the end. It's a fast program like this, 1 year or 1 year and change, which really drew me to the Brampton program, because the other programs out there were 3-4 years, which I wasn't willing to lose in addition to my university education. So I can't say either decision would be a bad one. And having post-secondary at university is also good as well, of course. The more you can put on your
Francis, if I
resume,
could
the
just
more
jump in.
education, the better.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
That's all great advice and 100% correct. Just one caveat is from a Transport Canada perspective, so not BFC, not AeroCourse, but of course, the regulator. There are only two types of people who can join an integrated program, those with a license and those without a license. So what I mean by that is hypothetically, if you were to start doing some flying, which as Francis said is fantastic, and that experience is never going to leave, and those hours are never going to go away. If you are, let's just say in this hypothetical, one flight away, you're a flight test away from holding a PPL, but the program is starting and you haven't done that yet. According to Transport Canada, you revert back to the beginning of the program, right? So we'd start you with the most basics. So absolutely, I think Francis's advice is great. Of to fly if you can, or it's never a bad thing. However, if you are going to be devoting, I'll say, extra time during your, whatever it be, maybe 3 year, 4 year post secondary, if you're applying to the program, just make sure you either hold a pilot's license, or if you're kind of in the middle, you may be reverting back to the beginning. Just something to be aware of.
Hey, Scott, if I could add to that, what Scott says is absolutely true. Hannah, you asked, well, this is one of the toughest questions that you could ever ask. I've got another side of what Francis did. I said, my father worked for Air Canada, and I went and saw the hiring manager, and he told me to go get a university degree when I was young, and I did that. Came out and got my flying license. We hit a recession, and then there was no hiring for a long time. My neighbor down the street didn't go get a university degree. He went out, did the flying right away, got a job, built up his hours, and Air Canada hired him, and he was way senior to me my whole career when I finally got to the airline. So timing is a big thing. So something to consider, and ask as many people as you can. But with the hiring being so high right now as compared to what, 10 years ago, Francis, there was no hiring going on.
Oh, it was bad. Yeah, it was
yeah.
bad. I'd say 15 years ago, and
Yeah.
then a little over, just under 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, 2008 when we went into the recession again, and that came out in
Right when I
12.
was graduating.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you ask us the toughest questions, but it is really important for everyone to hear that. So, but I agree with Francis. It's if you can get a post-secondary education, that is really good. It just depends on the timing when you do it.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, if I do get a PPL during university doing fast pay or the self-paced, would the cost for the IATPL be lower because I got that PPL?
Scott?
I'll jump in for that one. Yes, it would be lower. So in terms of all of the cost of the PPL flights that we quote in the program, that would all be deducted. So if you do enter in with a PPL for the program, you enter what's called modified phase 3. So this is a brief phase of about 7 or 8 lessons that you would participate in to just get you up to standards before you start getting exposed to the new CPL material in phase 4. So the only kind of cost for the private pilot license would be the cost of these 8 flights approximately. So it would be much more reduced from our quote. So I think we quote the private at approximately $19,000. So you would be subtracting a significant portion of that from that 97,000.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I think Hannah was our last hand up. So if I don't see any other hands up in the chat, one more. Catherine, feel free.
Yes, hi. So I was just wondering, like, I would be applying to this program like straight out of high school. So when I would graduate, I would be younger. I would be like 19, 20 in that range. So if I'm like, would I still be eligible for those like awards, like the airline ones? And if not, like, what would I do in that time?
Well, if I could, Catherine, you'd be exactly like Kaya, who she that you saw in the video. She was straight out of high school, and she's the one that's flying the very sophisticated medevac aircraft up north, and her trajectory is just going to take off once she gets some hours. She'll be in very high demand, I would suspect, Francis?
Absolutely. Kaya did awesome.
Yeah, Kaya did amazing.
But yeah, I don't think age will be an issue at all for any of the awards. The only age limit you need to worry about is holding the airline transport pilot's license, which won't happen until you have 1,500 hours anyways, has an age requirement of 21. Other than that, I don't think it'll be holding you back from anything.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question.
Okay, and Eves?
Yes, so my question is if I do the IATPL program and finish it successfully and then go to university for 4 years full time, does my license expire and I have to do the IATPL again because I've been inactive for 4 years, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want to cover that, Rick?
Sure. Yves, that's absolute excellent question, but all you have to do to maintain your license per se is two things. And Scott, you may have to step in here and correct me on this one, but you maintain your medical, and there's two ways. You have to validate your both your regular commercial license and your instrument through what they call instrument proficiency check, and you have to do that a minimum every 2 years. What for the commercial, Scott? How long does that have to be within when you do your flight evaluation again?
I don't see Scott on the call
Oh,
right now. He might have dropped out, but
yeah,
I believe you're right. I think it's every 2 years.
yeah. So yeah, and you can do that at Brampton. They have an excellent simulator that's going to be able to do that. So you can do that. One of the things that you'll find if you don't fly for 4 years, what you learned, you're going to be rusty and you'll have to get some time back in somewhere to do it. So that would be the whole thing. But no, you don't have to do the whole license again if that's your question.
So
The
it's
other thing is the SAMRA and the Saron exams. They're
Oh
frozen
yeah,
for 5 years.
yeah, good
So
point.
if you lose 4 years and you don't get the 1,500 hours to have those two exams turn into your full ATPL license, then you'll have to rewrite those exams.
I
It'll
see,
take
but it's possible to maintain the license during the 4 years. Only thing I'll have to 1 year to collect the 1,500 hours. Otherwise, I'll have to do the ATPL exams again, right?
exactly, yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do. 1,500 hours is a
And
lot
you
better.
can't do it. You can't do it in 1 year. Your maximum you're allowed to fly is 1,000 hours a year. So, um, you know, again, it goes back to my thing that I told Hannah Eves is that the job market is now. So yeah, if you want the university degree, it's exceedingly hard to fly full time and try to do it. But yeah, it's a complicated question. But what we're trying to educate the airlines on, all of them, is that um, what we provide, um, uh, the training wise, is every bit as good as a university degree as far as demonstrating that you have the capability of learning. Believe me, through the IATPL, if you can get through that, you get more than capable of learning and what they're looking for in a post-secondary education. I mean, the other reason why the hiring manager told me, and it's less important now back to the medical, is that he said if you lose your medical, you can always fall back on something. Um, I got a business degree, and I used my business degree, to do management positions. So that's another thing, is if you're ever interested in doing that. So that's kind of important. But I mean, realistically, Francis, there's three or four different areas they look for if from importance for pilots that have post-secondary. One is engineering. I've got specifically aeronautical engineering. Two is business management, business administration, because they need managers, right? Two would be technology, computer tech, and the last one would be education. Because
Yeah, I
we
would say
need a
anything that involves math or
yeah,
physics and stuff
yeah,
like that would be
yeah,
important.
yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we wrap up the seminar for this evening? Syed.
Sorry, hi Sydney. Thank you so much for taking my last question. So I was just having a
No
chat with
worries.
Kathy about an English testing requirement. Just want to clarify one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So requirement on the website that I saw on Brampton Flight Centre says that if we completed our 4 year of education, like high school education from Canada, and if we are a citizen of Canada, then we don't need to take the test. But the situation with me is a bit different. I am a Canadian citizen, and I did my last year of my high school from Canada. So it's gonna be grade 12 that I did, and then I will be completing my 4 year university degree over here. So do I still need to take the ALPD examination, or does that my university degree of 4 years exempts me from it? Just want to confirm that.
From the best of my knowledge, it is dependent on your high school. However, if you'd like, we can take this offline and I can kind of clarify with my manager, Kathy, and we can come to a consensus. But my
Sure.
understanding is if all 4 years are not in all 4 years of high school, sorry, are not in Canada, I believe the ALPD is required.
That
Right,
is
right, yeah.
true. I did answer that in the chat, and that's what I shared with Saeed.
Right. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah.
But Kathy, the exam's not that hard anyhow, is it? I'm
No,
just
No,
listening
I,
to
and
it.
I explained that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she did. She did. Yeah, I was reconfirming because I was just wanting to before I file for my application,
Yeah.
the dates are a bit close. That's why I was confirming. Thank you so much, Kathy and Sydney.
No worries.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that
my
the way
pleasure.
you're talking now, and the fact that if you pass grade 12, you'll have no problem with this test.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's
Really appreciate it.
exactly, it's more of a formality, honestly, just for us to have basically in your file. And it's something that we send off to Transport Canada so they can be certified that you're safe in terms of communication.
Thank you so
And
much,
again,
Kathy.
no
Thank you so much, Sydney.
background,
Really
no
appreciate it.
worries. Okay, and we will take our last question of the evening from Eves.
Sorry, one more last question. So let's say I finish the IATPL program. Is it possible to work as a pilot part-time and pursue a university degree part-time at the same time after finishing my full-time IPTL 2 years program?
I would say in theory, this would be a possibility. It does depend on kind of what avenue you choose to pursue and build your hours in. Certain positions might have more flexibility in terms of your schedule than others. For example, if you wanted to become a flight instructor, you might have an opportunity where you don't need to be a full-time flight instructor. You have the opportunity to only be a part-time instructor and only fly certain days of the week. And then the other days you're not flying of the week, you can be a university student. However, from my knowledge of some northern operations, I don't know that they would be able to balance an in-person university degree. However, I know there's a whole world of online university degrees, in a post-pandemic world as well. So I would say anything's possible. But again, it does depend on what structure of position you're looking to build those hours in.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So with that being said, we will wrap up the seminar for this evening. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have been recording this presentation. I will be posting it on our website as well as sharing a link to a recording to all of the attendees and all of the registrants as well. So if you had a friend who you wanted to share this video with, we will be able to post that shortly, likely within the next week. If you do have any other questions, feel free to send myself an email. You can contact me at admissions@bramfly.com. You can always just look up our website, bramptonflightcentre.com, or just Google Brampton Flight Centre. We're usually the top results. And myself or my colleague Rita would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have, whether it's about the IATPL or college program or the self-paced program. We're here to kind of support whatever questions you might have. But with that being said, thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you next time.